Mrs. T-Bill Banks of the National Association for the Advancement of Rich People.
I sent a pair of these up to Sarah Palin, and she said, "Now the moose come to me." Thank you for inviting me here this evening to give the eulogy for Alexander Haig. Oh, excuse me, wrong speech. Thank you for inviting me here this evening to celebrate the anniversary of the peace symbol. Now, before I came this evening, I did some research on the internet. And what I love about the internet is that one can find support for whatever one's position is, no matter how unique it may be. Now, the first article I looked at said that the peace symbol, of course, designed by a foreigner based on satanic ideas, was first brought over to this country by a student from the University of Chicago. However, further research found a better explanation. This article here said that it was brought over by Bayard Rustin for civil rights marches. I don't know if all of you know who he is, but he was later exposed to be gay and African American. Now, speaking of the whole gay issue, I understand that your President Obama has asked Secretary of Defense Gates to look into the possibility of setting up a committee which would sometime in the indeterminate future look into the possibility of repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Now, many of you may wonder, why couldn't he just take after Harry Truman, who by executive order desegregated the military? I say these situations have nothing in common. President Truman did not have to worry about being called a sissy because he had just dropped the A-bomb on Japan. In a related story, at the CPAC convention, although the people there are both against both same-sex marriage and gays in the military, through some strange voting procedure, they managed to pick as their favorite son candidate Raoul Paul. Well, I guess no one has the same cultural references that I have, but then again, I don't live in the same world as you do. Now, conservative groups are always paying homage to President Reagan and referring to him as the great communicator, while we here have President Obama, the great compromiser. Now, how else should I have to pay taxes on it? I'm also happy to hear that Michelle Obama has finally chosen her First Lady charity. You know, like how Nancy Reagan did drugs, And then Laura Bush, whose literacy program was so successful, and we saw it when Georgia sat there all through 9/11, reading that little white rabbit story right to the end. Well, Michelle has finally chosen her charity, and she's joining the fight against childhood obesity. I say she has that all wrong. If our teenage boys would only put on a pound or two, perhaps their pants wouldn't always be falling down. Leave no child behind. We here in Berkeley are having a problem too. The city is losing money because people are so successful at the recycling that there's not enough money in fees collected from the picking up of trash. I say that each of us can do our own little part to solve this problem. I, for one, when I go to the supermarket, I don't bring in one of those ugly hemp tote bags. I proudly walk up to the clerk and say, "Plastic, please," and double bag it. Have you also noticed that in the news, the position of vice president seems to have taken precedency over the president itself? I mean, look at all those debates between Biden and Cheney. Where were Obama and Bush? Nowhere to be seen. And Sarah Palin, there, the Red Queen at the Mad Hatter's Tea Party. Although the movie hasn't come out yet, I understand that Johnny Depp is quite unhappy having to play opposite her. But the, I'm sorry. Oh, there it is. This issue of the second in command being more important is also being shown by how our very own San Francisco Mayor, Gavin Newsom, has given up the race for governor and instead is running for lieutenant governor. I'm also glad that in respect for the Winter Olympics and in homage to the use of the mixed metaphor, the Justice Department has decided that even though the torture memo writers were skating on thin legal ice, they will not be penalized for skateboarding. Waterboarding, excuse me. Watching too much television these days, sorry about that. And finally, you all saw Tiger Woods there at his little press conference. And people said, if he's so contrite and he admits he cheated and he had all these affairs, why is he having to go back into sex rehab? Shouldn't he just be dismissed by now? Well, I understand there's something behind this story. The administration has put some pressure on his sex rehab clinic that they are not to release him permanently until he owns up to being the father of John Edwards' baby. And I'm also glad to see that we're finally giving full personhood to corporations. Now, when they put out ads, they will just have to say exactly who they are and who they're sponsoring. But I'm sort of sad to see the old way go. I used to love to see those ads against Obama being put out by insurance companies, and you would read along the bottom, paid for by the Frail Citizens Committee Against Death Panels. Unfortunately, now Anthem Blue Cross will just have to say, brought to you by Anthem Blue Cross. Kind of sad. And finally, one of the nice things about the peace symbol is that it was never copyrighted, and people are allowed to put it to whatever purpose they want, to modify it, to use it however they like. It's a wonderful thing. So I'd like to present an alternative to you this evening. I'd like to see this up here. This is the Republican Party's proposed budgetary pie. Over here we have military-industrial complex. Here we have bank bailouts and price supports to pharmaceutical companies. Right here we have Sarah Palin's clothing allotment for 2012. And finally, everything else. So happy birthday, Peace Symbol.
Hey, Selma!